Live from New York, it's the Coolios. Featuring the hosts of How Cool Is This? Brian and Nick.
Welcome, everybody, to the first annual Coolios. I'm Nick, one of the hosts of How Cool Is This?
I'm Brian, I'm the other guy.
And this is our award show where we're going to look at some of the coolest and some of the least cool ideas that we've had on the podcast in 2020.
And a few in between.
Yeah. So first, I think we want to get an elephant in the room out of the way.
Yeah.
We're idiots. We're very dumb. Previously, this show was called The Coolies. And then one of our idea people, one of the people that have submitted to the podcast, brought to our attention that coolie is apparently a racial slur.
Yeah, and we don't need to go into too much about that. We don't want to make a mountain out of a molehill, but we will say that yesterday was a fantastic day to change the name of our accidentally racist award show.
Thank you too, Victor, for pointing that out to us. We should have done at least one Google search before we named this award show. We neglected to do so, and that was really dumb. So now the name of this award show is the Coolios. But unfortunately, it has nothing to do with this Coolio. Although if they'd like to sue us, I think we might get some notoriety.
We figured if he sued us, then the headline would be Coolio wants podcast hosts to change award show to racist name.
Anyway, before we get into the show, we're a podcast that talks about how cool things are, especially ideas. So we say the word cool a lot. So a fun game for all of you viewers at home might be to, whenever you hear the word cool, take a drink. You might need a lot to drink if you're going to play this game.
And that is if you hear cool or coolio. If you aren't a drinker, then feel free to do a burpee or a push-up or just nothing. It's really up to you. We don't really care.
Yeah, you can just choose to relax and enjoy the show if you want.
Ignore the coup that's going on and just sit back and have a good time.
Yeah, do your best to ignore the coup. I'm going to have a drink, though.
All right.
You want to talk about the nominees, Brian?
Yeah, so we've got 5 categories for you. The coolest idea that already exists, the best idea that wasn't that cool, Schrödinger's cool, the least cool idea, and then the coolest idea that doesn't exist yet. And this pulls from all the ideas that were submitted last year. We had 60 episodes last year, 20 more the year before, so this is just those 60.
So our first category of the night is the coolest idea that already exists. First up in this category was Nina Moran with her idea that women should skate more often.
Basically, a huge group skate of just women, and it makes like an open, safe environment for women to be happy and free to try something that's scary, but also interesting and uplifting.
Yeah, so that's Nina's idea. We found her at a park.
Brian said that in a really creepy way. We did not just find a teenage girl at a park and talk to her. We were trying to solicit ideas from all sorts of people in New York, and we handed out a free slice of pizza for everyone that gave us an idea. So a lot of the ideas you'll hear tonight came from that session back in February when we were allowed to go outside.
Pay It Forward creates communities and matches local pet owners to exchange pet sitting on a Pay It Forward model. So I sit your pet, and then you pay that forward to someone else.
That was Laura Kagawa with Pay It Forward.
Yeah, basically a really cool idea to help the pet community take care of each other. I think if I had a dog, which maybe in the near future, I would definitely be part of Pay It Forward.
Yeah, Laura, if you know anybody who's not able to take care of their dogs, I think both of us might be interested. We would not raise the dog together.
No, that wouldn't go well. Next up is Priya Min with flexible virtual childcare.
Up until COVID, the company was providing pop-up childcare on site. Right now, what we're doing is meeting parents exactly where they are, which is working remotely. We are not only providing virtual childcare services to help parents get a reprieve or get time back, but also help with after-school accountability.
I think we decided in our episode that after-school accountability doesn't necessarily sound cool, especially if you're a child. But if you're a parent, I can see how that would be cool.
On the whole, the flexibility of it was cool to us. Next idea that we have here is Dan Wolf with the Actual Vote app to audit elections.
We've built apps with mobile software that empower ordinary Americans to conduct independent audits of their own local elections. so that they can be sure that their votes have been counted and reported accurately.
It's certainly a timely idea right now. We wouldn't want people to use this for the wrong reasons, but this idea was part of a series we did around the election of all election democracy and voting related ideas in the show.
Yeah, we'd hate if somebody were to, use this to say the election was rigged or something. That would be disgusting.
Yep.
But that would never happen.
No, that would not be cool. And finally, in our category, the coolest idea that already exists, we have Ian Polly with Polly's Pockets.
Instead of having a regular pocket tee with boring fabric, why not get a pocket shirt that has cool fabric on it, like hot dogs or lemons or trees or chicken tenders or whatever you want?
I'm wearing a pocket t-shirt tonight, but there is nothing on it. And I think this shirt might be a little bit cooler if it was one of Polly's Pockets.
One thing before we announce the winner is, once again, this is the coolest idea that already exists. Obviously, the first one is a little more abstract in the sense that women skateboard, but it's not a product or service. The other four are companies that exist.
Yeah, and if you want to find out more about these companies or buy their products or participate in their communities, I would go back to each of the episodes. You can see the episode numbers listed alongside of there, and you'll find links to these companies in the show notes of those episodes.
Or use Google like we could have for the name of our award show.
But been smart.
Anyway, the Coolio goes to
Laura Kagawa for Pod Forward. Yeah, Laura. She was able to send us in an acceptance speech.
Hey guys, thanks so much for the Coolio. That's awesome. We're really glad you like our idea to make pet sitting more affordable and more fun. And Perry says thanks too. And thanks so much to you for creating a place for people to come and share their ideas. We think that's a really cool idea as well. So thanks so much, everyone. Stay safe.
I know it's early on in the show, but Perry might be the coolest thing about the show tonight.
Maybe the only thing.
Yeah, we'll see.
The next category that we have is the best idea that wasn't that cool.
These ideas are interesting ideas worth talking about, but they're just not that cool. First up is Victor Sue with modular building development.
The way that homes are built now is everything is customized. If you're looking for an affordable home, it doesn't need to be customized. You can have things that are completely standardized and be very comfortable and very high quality.
Yeah, that's one of those things where I love to own a house. The idea of houses that are similar and they're made in an assembly line is useful, it's beneficial. Is it like cool?
Not necessarily, but making sure that more people have access to affordable housing is certainly pretty cool.
Yeah. The next idea is Hannah Vanderpool, DXM on Broadway, and I personally thought this was the coolest idea out there.
Do you want to give a little disclaimer as to why, or are you just going to be ambiguous?
We are dating, which isn't to say that this idea isn't that cool. It's that it was better than it was cool.
Yeah.
This program would supply Broadway theaters with DXM-based products, such as Robitussin, in carbon-neutral, single-use dispensers. Anytime a spectator felt respiratory distress coming on, they would be able to quickly address it, eliminating any risk of ever having another once-in-a-lifetime theater experience ruined.
I guess the last time I saw a Broadway show was in February before the pandemic.
I did too.
And there was someone that was coughing very loudly all throughout To Kill a Mockingbird. They probably had the deadly respiratory disease that has spread the globe since then, but DXM could have helped them not cough as much.
Yeah, and this idea was actually submitted in January, which makes it a little extra special. And maybe I'm flattering it a little bit too much because of my connection.
You do have to go home to her after the show, so I understand why you're doing it.
And how cool is that?
Next up, James Mulvaney with Going on a Podcast Tour.
Well, the concept of a podcast tour is really simple. It is literally going on a tour on as many different podcasts as you can and appearing as a guest to not only promote what you're trying to promote, but also to try and impart knowledge and share your skills, your expertise with other people.
So I think James was going on a podcast tour when he came on our podcast.
That was cool. And as podcast hosts, we've said in the past that podcasts themselves are not like cool, but this was the best idea because obviously going on a regular tour during the aforementioned respiratory disease that spread the globe, which we refused to name, that made this a very good idea.
Yeah.
Next idea is Richard Davies, who sent in an idea in our hotline when we were doing daily episodes back in election time.
Downsize the electoral college, but don't get rid of it. So how cool is this? Compromise, don't destroy. 50% electoral college, 50% popular vote.
You know, Richard gets extra points for putting the name of our show in his idea. It makes us feel good when we're putting that idea on the show. But I thought this was interesting in terms of we hear a lot of people talk about abolishing the electoral college, but Richard came in with an idea that seemed a little bit more
practical.
Yeah, willing to compromise, which right now seems pretty impossible, but might be a good way going forward. Finally, in the best idea that wasn't cool is Dr. Andrea Mulber with fogging to find common ground.
Fogging is where you look for something you can agree with, even on the surface, and simply say, without denying, defending, or attacking back, you're right, or it could look that way.
I'd say this one is especially useful when maybe you know someone who thinks that the election was rigged and they went to the Capitol and stormed it and broke through police barriers and then broke into an elected congressperson's desk.
I've found myself, after we had this idea on the podcast, using the phrase, it could look that way, a little bit more often. And I think it does a decent job of diffusing any sort of tense situation that you might find yourself in.
Yeah, but sometimes one person is more in the wrong than the other, and this does a little bit of a both sides juggle that might not be fair, but maybe that's just what I think.
It might look that way. So the Coolio for the best idea that wasn't that cool goes to Richard Davies with the 50-50 vote.
Hey, this is Richard Davies from How Do We Fix It, which is a podcast about solutions, a little bit like yours, although we go on much longer. And I'm excited about getting a Coolio for a not very cool idea about fixing the Electoral College rather than getting rid of it completely. Anyway, thanks very much, Brian and Nick, and wishing you all the best with your podcast and the Coolio Awards.
It certainly takes some gall to come on the award show for another podcast and promote your podcast, but Richard had a good idea, so I think he's allowed to do it. Before we move too much further, I did want to acknowledge the chat. It looks like Perry, the dog, has his own Instagram, @PerryNYC. So if you would like more Perry content, please go to @PerryNYC, who I'm definitely going to follow probably in the middle of the show.
I used to follow, but then I deleted my Instagram account to stick it to Facebook.
You really showed Mark Zuckerberg.
Yeah, he's reeling.
Our next category for the night is Schrödinger's cool. Ideas that were simultaneously cool and uncool.
Whether it was the situation was uncool, but the idea was, or the idea was both cool and not. Just confounding.
Right. Complicated ideas.
And you'll notice big followers of the show. The first guess is my father.
I'm noticing a lot of favoritism in the nominees tonight, skewing towards you.
Well, the problem is that we tell anybody, you can send in an idea. So it's people who know us, who hear us say that. So eventually we will not have that favoritism. Tell all your friends and then make sure that we're not having this problem next year. Anyway, Mike Ritz, cruise ship hospitals.
Can the United States use the cruise ships, retrofit them to be floating hospital systems for different ports of entry?
I remember when the cruise ship first showed up in New York. I guess it was back in April.
Yeah.
I was kind of excited by it just because it seemed like an exciting thing. But the idea that we had to deploy a cruise ship hospital was just not very cool. The next idea in Schrödinger's cool is Christian Mundahl with measuring time in Quibbies.
My idea is that we should start measuring instances of time in Quibbies.
Thank you, Christian.
For those unfamiliar with Quibi, because it lived a very short life, it was a streaming video service where every episode of something was only 10 minutes long.
Which that's a little near and dear to our hearts because our podcast is 5 minutes long.
Yeah.
And something that I found, I don't know about you, is people don't consume media by the length of time.
No. And even though Quibi had billions of dollars in terms of investments, it sank faster than the Titanic.
And we're still going. So I don't know what that means, but I guess it's just expectations versus reality.
I'm going to take that as a good sign. We're smarter than people that have billions of dollars.
Next up is Donnie Zolden. He runs a comedy club in New York, and during the aforementioned shutdown, lockdown, virus, quarantine, was told he couldn't do his business anymore.
We also did an illegal open mic for pro comics. Half the comedy community loved it, half hated it and thought it was irresponsible, but we tried it once. We realized that wasn't the smartest idea, so we stopped that.
Yeah, comedy is certainly something that can help people have a better mood when we're going through a year like we did last year. Flaunting the rules of a pandemic just to get a few laughs in isn't necessarily the coolest thing. Next up is us for our podcast Revisited. At our 50th episode of How Cool Is This, we decided to go back to our very first idea, which was this podcast. For various reasons, this podcast is cool and completely uncool.
And it's weird that we're even talking about our own and trying to potentially award it, but that fits the bill at the same time.
Well, we've always been self-aware. I think that's a good thing.
Sometimes.
We basically have an idea, and that idea is this podcast.
We figured we needed to have a podcast because everybody has a podcast.
It's important.
Yeah.
And then the last idea in this category, Schrödinger's Cool, is Golda Velez with door-to-door affidavits. This was during the election period again. And this was an idea designed to verify the election in the case that somebody said, hey, these results aren't right. Here is Golda.
You just go knock on the door. You ask people, how did you vote? You don't have to go on the street with an AK-47 threatening people. You can just chat.
I can think of a few people that should have listened to this idea before yesterday and decided that they did not need to resort to violence to make sure that the results of the election were accurate. Golda's idea just to politely go door to door and ask your neighbors who they voted for seemed a little bit more civil.
Yeah, of course, the reason that this fit into this category is the aforementioned pandemic. That's a super spreader event. This is a big theme this year. I would say the news story of the year was COVID.
Really?
Yeah.
That was it?
Maybe. The winner of 2021 Schrödinger's Coolio is
Donnie Zoldan with his illegal comedy.
We asked Donnie to do a quick video, and I think it's a little longer. He's a rule flouter. What can we say?
Hey everybody, Donnie Zoldan here from Stand Up New York. Sorry I couldn't be there with you today. I'm currently in New York City in my club Stand Up New York, scheming to figure out how to break some more laws and bring more shows to New Yorkers. We're very proud that we were able to break the laws and produce over 400 illegal comedy shows throughout the summer and fall. And cops try to break up our shows a few times, but thankfully we overpowered them and they let us continue the shows. So I'm just grateful that we had the opportunity to bring laughter to New Yorkers during the pandemic and did whatever it takes in order to do that, even if I risked going to jail for the night, which I would have done. But thankfully it didn't come to that, and we'll be here for a long time, as long as indoor dining is closed and comedy shows are permitted. I'm looking forward to exploiting every loophole that we possibly can and breaking every law that we possibly can in order to continue bringing comedy to you. So again, thank you for the Coolio Award. I'm very humbled by it. Again, sorry I couldn't be there for you. Sorry I couldn't be there with you, and I love you.
Love you too.
I hope that no law enforcement officials are watching the show tonight, because that might be kind of an admission of guilt from Donnie. Probably permissible in court of law.
They're probably busy with the coup.
That is gone.
Sorry to remind you.
Before we move on, I just want to go back to the chat real quick. My father has chimed in. He said that he wants me to mention his dog, George, who is also listening to the show. Unfortunately, George does not have an Instagram that you can follow, unlike Perry. So maybe if George gets an Instagram and starts producing some content, then he'll be a little bit more famous.
Yeah, and maybe George and Perry can follow each other and then slowly become friends, dog friends. That's cool.
Dogs being friends is very cool.
What's not cool is the least cool idea, which this was an awkward one. Obviously, you've seen that we have videos for the winners. So if you tuned in and you were like, I hope I win, and then you didn't hear from us, sorry, I guess I don't want to spoil that. But hopefully you still want to know what beat you. But this one was an awkward one to reach out to people. I will say that.
Well, in the 60 ideas that we had on the show in the past year, I would say the majority of them were cool. But we can't control who submits an idea. We like to talk to everybody and try to give as many people a platform for their idea as possible. And sometimes that means we just get some terribly uncool ideas on the show. And these are 5 of the most uncool that we heard in the past year.
It doesn't necessarily mean that they are uncool. It just means that they are less cool than the other ideas.
You're trying to be nice. You're afraid somebody's going to bust in the door and beat you up.
Yeah, and then tell them that we had an award show called the Coolios, which is a slur, and I shouldn't have said it there. But then we become Bean Dad. I don't want to be Bean Dad. The least cool idea, first one is Isaiah. Men should be stronger.
I feel that we should talk more about men being stronger in the world. I feel men's gender is losing. They want to take the masculine man away and turn men into soft men. I don't think that's right.
Yeah, I don't think men are losing in any way, shape, or form right now. So not super cool of Isaiah to say that.
I wish people in New York would only cross a street when they're supposed to and get tickets if they don't. Maybe we could make underground crossings to help.
She was one of the people who we met at the park and gave her pizza for her idea. She filled out a form, so we just did a voice of it. That's not what Lana sounds like. But that is actually a pretty good idea, the underground crossing. The problem, of course, is the jaywalking.
I love jaywalking. I think it's okay to jaywalk. I really don't think the police should be out there handing out more tickets to jaywalkers when there should be less police anyway. So that's kind of what made this idea cool.
Is that evidence that's permissible in court? You just admitted to jaywalking. I would never admit to a crime.
Yeah, well, you're not as cool as I am.
Well, Rita, doctors, stop murdering patients. This one, just so you know, was also before COVID.
Yes.
There are many, many patients that are dying in hospitals where people think it's because of their illness, when in fact it's due to mistakes that are made.
I don't know much what to say about this. There was little to no evidence produced as to why this was happening, but it's just one article.
Next, we have Sean Morgan, who submitted QAnonFAQ.com. You would think it would have been a nice episode, but it was not. Or was it? You decide. No, we decided. It's not.
Not cool.
Which key word has been attacked by mainstream media more than any other? It's QAnon. Would the mainstream media really expend so much effort to discredit QAnon if it was merely a self-evident conspiracy theory?
If you don't know much about what QAnon is, I encourage you not to research it because it's an absolutely horrible conspiracy theory that has ruined people's lives and was close to directly responsible for the events that happened in the Capitol yesterday. So that's why it's pretty uncool.
Yeah, and then if you're offering an introductory course into it, that makes it a little bit less cool. You know, it's like you're the entrant to the cult or the entrant to the multi-level marketing scheme.
A drug dealer that doesn't care when people's lives get ruined.
Sure. Last idea is Stephanie Kaplan. I thought there were parts of it that were pretty cool, but on the whole, it fit the bill. This is corporate woke place.
Our world today has a sinister component called cancel culture, which allows people and companies to, quote, be canceled if they deviate from politically correct, often referred to as woke orthodoxy. America was founded on the principle of free speech. If we lose that, we will regret it.
I mean, I love free speech. We wouldn't be able to have this podcast without free speech. But if your free speech is hurtful towards other people, then it's not cool.
Yeah, like if you name your award show a certain thing and then that's a slur, that's not cool. But if you're grateful that you didn't get dragged on Twitter because the Capitol was being stormed,
you really do have to keep bringing that up.
I want people to know that we have changed.
Yes. So the winner, the Coolio for the least cool idea in 2020 goes to Sean Morgan for QAnonFAQ.com.
Sean could not be reached for comment, but we did allow him to respond. We did even invite him to join us live on Zoom. We didn't offer that to anybody else, and that did not happen. And we have a theory as to why.
Yeah. I think Sean might have been a little busy yesterday committing treason in the nation's capital.
So, sorry, Sean, or congrats. That's not him. That's not him, actually, just so we are clear.
It is just a guy with a QAnon shirt. This is just a theory, by the way, just like QAnon.
Our final category is the coolest idea that doesn't exist yet. And I don't know if anybody at home is monitoring how many times we've said the word cool, but if you are, you're probably pretty inebriated at this point, or you've done a ton of burpees. I don't know how you're going through with this, or you're just sitting there and you're just like, all right, this is a nice welcome distraction.
You might be inebriated enough that you can come up with an idea that no one else has ever thought of before, so that next year you might be in this category for the Coolios.
But for now, this is this year, although we're talking about last year.
First up is Miguel Ortiz with the Times Square video game.
My idea is a game, a PlayStation game or arcade anything. It's called Times Square, where everything is live. Everything, like, you know, robberies, people using, people doing good. Everything live. That's my idea.
Everything live does sound pretty cool. I'm not exactly sure how this game would work, but the idea of a live game where people can do good and do bad does sound cool.
Yeah. Up next, we got Mackenzie and Gabby with Studio 45. We met them at the park. Not weird.
Here's the problem. We're in New York. Everything closes at 4 a.m, and we still need to party until at least 6 to 8 in the morning.
And nobody's naked at the club.
And nobody's naked. Nobody's naked.
Have you ever been to Berlin? Sex parties everywhere. So that's what we're trying to bring to New York. Studio 54, we're calling it Studio 45 because we're subverting it.
We're subverting it. We're bringing it from the 80s back to now.
Yeah, I think unfortunately plans for Studio 45 were tabled when the pandemic hit, but it does sound like what would be the coolest club in all of New York.
The rent's pretty cheap right now, so
I don't know if we would be cool enough to get in, but I'm glad that we had this cool idea on the show.
I mean, if you got a beanie, that might work.
Maybe.
I look like I just came from the office.
Not cool.
Yeah, it's cool to own who you are.
Next up is Kyle Clement with Hire a Karen.
It's a service where you hire a Karen to basically handle a dispute or some sort of confrontation on your behalf. Maybe you're not necessarily a confrontational person. You can use the Hire a Karen service who will fight your battles for you.
There are a lot of Karens in the news this year, mainly for bad reasons. But if you could use the powers of a Karen for good, that's pretty cool.
White woman got a bad rap this year, which, fair or not, obviously some of the stuff that went viral was awful on the whole. It's probably a more complex situation, but regardless, people who are named Karen are probably having a hard time. So this is a rehabilitation opportunity.
Yeah, help people out.
The next idea is Brandon Foster with the exit interview.
I assume there are just so many stories that go untold because people need the severance package. So that's the idea for the exit interview. It would be a platform for people to tell these kinds of stories. It would sort of create a have your cake and eat it too situation where you could speak out about these things and not have to go broke because of it.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of evil corporations that buy people's silence when it comes to the bad things that they did. And this idea was cool because it helped people have the funding to tell those stories and make sure that corporations didn't get away with that bad stuff.
Yeah, and I don't have a situation like that in my past because if I did, then I would talk about it. But no,
you don't. Finally, the coolest idea that doesn't exist yet is Alex Kack with a tax credit through voting.
For those of you who have not heard of this man, he went viral last year, 2 years ago, for wearing a green shirt and laughing really hard at a meeting. Green shirt guy.
More viral than us.
How cool is the idea of getting paid to vote? One thing we could do is give everyone a fixed amount off of their taxes if they cast a ballot in that election. One thing that everyone understands is $60 or $100 back in their pocket.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't mind getting a tax break for voting. And I do think it would be a pretty good incentive to get more people to the polls.
I like money.
Who doesn't? It's cool.
But some people don't like people voting.
That's not cool.
Yeah, that just means that, people don't like you, which self-awareness is cool, but the general principle behind that is not as cool. Anyway, the winner for the coolest idea that doesn't exist yet is Kyle Clement, Hire Karen. When reached for comment, Kyle had this to say.
Hello, and thank you so much for the honor of giving me this award for the coolest idea that doesn't exist yet. I'm just completely thrilled, and I feel like this just really shows that if you have a friend that has a clever idea, instead of encouraging that friend, take their idea and profit from it yourself. So with that, I would also like to thank my brother-in-law, Aaron Mancha, who originally came up with the idea that I then took from him and used to win this award. So thank you. And I would also like to announce, on that note, that I have a podcast coming out soon called How Rad Is That? It's a 2-minute podcast episode where we talk about how rad...
All right, that is the Coolios. Thank you, everybody who was here, in and out, stayed around. I don't know. We don't really know who was watching. And that's the joy of this. That's the joy of podcasting. They're like middlemen that know who you are, but we have no idea. We just talk.
Yeah. Congratulations to all of the winners of Coolios tonight. Congratulations to all of the nominees. It was a great year for How Cool Is This? 60 episodes, a ton of ideas. So a lot of fun to do, a lot of fun to hear all these different ideas, and look forward to getting even more next year.
Yeah, there's 300 minutes of audio or 30 quickies.
If you want to be on How Cool Is This? If you want to be one of the people that your idea gets heard on the show and maybe even wins a Coolio, or the easiest thing for you to do is call our hotline. You can just leave us a voicemail at 848-863-9917 and use that audio on the show.
And someone in the chat asked if they're an award, is there a gift? We will be ordering trophies. So if you want an award, we'll get in touch with you. But if you don't respond, then you won't get an award. But we'll get you something shipped.
Yes, the winners of the Coolios do get a physical award in addition to friends. So it is worth it to submit an idea to the show because you might get a cheap plastic.
Yeah, maybe next year we could order Coolio cones. If there are any football heads out there, that'll be an award. We're a lot of different options here.
Speaking of, if you have an idea that is a better name for this award show, just leave us a voicemail at 848-863-9917.
If you are wanting to listen to the full episodes from the ideas in the Coolios, check out this link, bit.ly/Spotify Coolios, and it's a Spotify playlist of the ideas. and the episodes too.
Thanks to everybody who listens to, supports the show. We'll be back soonish with some more episodes, some new ideas in 2021. Hopefully some ideas even cooler than the ones that we heard tonight.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.